We demystify what goes on behind the therapy room door. Join us on this voyage of discovery and co-creative conversations. This is The Therapy Show, Behind Closed Doors podcast.
With Bob Cooke
and Kellie Barratt.
Hello and welcome to The Therapy Show, Behind Closed Doors. I'm here with the wonderful Mr. Bob Cooke, and I'm Kellie Barratt.
Oh, thank you for that introduction.
I'm channeling Jackie, Bob. So today we're talking about, we're in episode number 210, and the title is, Does a Therapist's Display of Emotions Affect the Therapeutic Process?
Right, okay, and I'll start because I was talking in the last podcast, because you introduced the title, about therapists who might be trained, for whatever reasons, to never show emotions.
Yes.
And I call them the stoic therapists, or we could call them the be strong therapists, or we could call them trying to be perfect therapists. We could call them many different names. And then I thought, well, perhaps I'm being unfair to them really, because I'm sure there's a thinking approach to why they are trained not to show emotions. And I can think of these, of course, but I'm not one of them.
No. So are you talking about general therapists, or are you talking about school, like specific types of therapists? Like a psychoanalyst wouldn't be showing any emotions.
Well,
not.
But in answer to your question, I'm talking about it generally.
Generally, okay, yeah.
No, you're right. Let's get back to what you're just going to say. You're right. The training of the psychotherapist, the model they've been trained in, will influence whether the therapist would, maybe in the relationship, show vulnerability, or what they call vulnerability, and may also be trained not to express feelings. So you're correct. And you mentioned psychoanalysis, and again, you are correct. I don't know about 2025 so much, but I know Freud's position in 1888 was that the therapist, as much as they could, stayed out of the relationship, and it was through the interpretation of the analyst that the patient would be able to take those wise words to combat the disturbance. So you were right. That's 1888. It was all about staying out of the relationship in the psychodynamic world. Now, 2025, I haven't read it, but I saw a book recently in the bookshop. I'm sure there's many, by the way, what I'm going to say, on relational psychoanalysis. This
is fascinating for me because I've never heard of it.
Do you mean the term?
Yeah, relational. My image of psychoanalysis is that the client, or they would say the patient, is projecting all of their stuff onto the therapist, and that's how the therapist is processing it and interpreting it. So the therapist is not part of that.
Yeah, back in 1888.
Well, that's what I thought it was.
Many of the psychoanalysts. However, you put in relational psych. I tell you what, put in Stephen Mitchell.
Okay, I'm going to write that down.
Stephen Mitchell, I'm not sure if he's alive at the moment. I don't think he is. I think he's passed away. I'm looking at a book that he wrote up in my bookshelf, and he would talk about relational psychoanalysis.
That's fascinating.
The book I saw the other day, and perhaps it was on Amazon, it must have been. I've been in a psychotherapy bookshop for ages. And it was a new book, and I'm sure it's called Relational Psychoanalysis. So the term relational psychoanalysis isn't new. It's been around for a while. And people come from that place, of course, they're not on the traditional couch anymore.
Yeah.
But in general,
yes.
Take away the shift.
Yes.
You are correct. I understand exactly what you're talking about. which is especially in classical psychoanalysis rather than relational psychoanalysis, it's very much the way you described it. The methods is free association, interpretation is so valuable, the therapist, all the things you just talked about there. So people will be trained not to be in the relationship, which of course means if you're not in the relationship, then you're not going to be expressing emotions. That's where you're going with that. So yes, I do think what we're trained in often influences highly the style of psychotherapy we follow.
But were you talking more in general of our own personal drivers as therapists? So like I'll be perfect, and we might then the stoic therapist, but that might be like our personal way of therapy.
Well, if we talk about this podcast and the subject we're talking about, then of course our own history, how we are, whether it be the defenses of being perfect or being strong or whatever we're talking about here, may not allow us to be vulnerable in the therapy room because of our history. We haven't done, I don't believe, enough of our own therapy to allow ourselves to be vulnerable in the relationship, even if we believe it. In other words, even if we have a different framework from the training path we're trained in. But because of our own issues, if you like, that might come in the way of expressing emotions.
So the therapist might keep themselves safe by staying out of that process.
I think it's always that way. I believe many times when psychotherapy isn't so effective is when therapists' own issues haven't been resolved. So they're defending against those issues and overwhelming feelings for themselves and go a different way in psychotherapy that perhaps would have been more effective.
So they might move away from the client's process, move away from the
let's just have a clear example.
Yep.
Somebody comes into therapy and you say to them, what would you like to work on? And they say, my depression. I've been depressed for 25 years. I've gone to the doctors for 24 years and had, drugs and drugs and drugs. And now I want to try and resolve this rather than being on drugs for the rest of my life. And I'm going to give psychotherapy a chance. Yes, so that's the contract. However, unfortunately, I think for effective cure, where we go, they picked a depressed therapist. Or they've picked a therapist that has in their history depression and it hasn't been healed or dealt with through therapy. So what may happen then is that when the client starts to look at the depression and maybe the origins of their depression, the therapist's own depression gets triggered. So what the therapist might do, because they don't want to feel their overwhelming depression, is start to do therapy from a cognitive perspective rather than an emotional perspective.
Yes, that makes absolute sense. It's presumably happening unconsciously for the therapist.
Yes, out of awareness.
Yeah.
That's very, very common. I picked that example, but I can think of many others. When the therapist stroke counsellor hasn't done the work on their own history, and so may end either up merging with the client or avoiding where they really need to go because they don't want to feel their own feelings.
Oh, and they might be worried that they couldn't, if they do feel their own feelings, they can't contain them. Because that's not helpful for I mean, as I'm like you and I do show my emotions, but in a measured way. But, if a therapist starts crying and the client's, hearing the client's terrible story, that's not going to be helpful, presumably.
Well, I don't think it's any actual, what's the word, 100% in psychotherapy. I can think of many times when a person expresses emotions and has such an impact on the client that actually showing their own impact to the client has transformational aspects for the client.
It's very accounting for the client to know that I am moved or that I'm feeling sad. But you know, if I start sobbing with the client, that's not. Well, I don't think that would be very helpful. You know, feeling very moved.
The title of this podcast, I haven't put if the therapist is sobbing. I totally agree with you. If the therapist has moved to some younger self, where and starts to, you know, get in touch with a tense emotion like that, then what might happen, of course, in many different scenarios, could be that the client stops what they really need to start expressing themselves and takes care of the therapist.
Exactly. Yes.
If you talk about that extreme example,
I have heard of it. I have heard of therapists.
I'm sure you're correct, by the way. I'm a huge advocate. You won't find a bigger advocate than me for therapists to do their own work.
Yeah.
If they're going to move to the Charlie state or younger self, whichever way we look at this, and they are triggered by, you know, what the person's talking about, to an extent where they lose track of their own self-agency, then no one's any use to anyone. No effective psychotherapy will stop. So I agree completely in that circumstance, and I'm sure that does happen. I'm not saying that might not happen, and certainly in minor ways, definitely. So if we move away from sobbing and uncontrollable urges of emotion, but there may be times at a different level where a therapist might express emotions. I'm not talking about sobbing here. I'm talking about, you know, showing they're upset.
Yeah, so a contained expression of their own emotion. So it's a contained emotion. So it's not run away.
Yeah, and not run away is a very good sentence. I like that. One of the dangers, I think, of therapists, or could be a danger, or at least one to think about, is when the therapist even shows controlled emotion, the client might move into taking care of the therapist instead of going to where they need to go to. So I think it's important for us to consider. So I have a maximum or a way of thinking about this. That is that whatever's in service of the client is okay.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah.
And it might be really okay and permissive giving for the therapist to share with the client, I feel really moved and part of myself maybe is in unison with you in expressing some tears.
Yeah.
For example.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember being on this subject's quite close to my heart, because if you take me back 20 or 30 years ago, I probably thought it was crying as a therapist was something never to happen, which I believe a lot of counsellors, therapists probably even think. That was linked in with thoughts or process, which was some traumas are worse than others. In other words, so dramatic than others. XXX. But I remember going on a workshop with a therapist I really respected, and he was doing some work with somebody who had been in concentration camps and things like that. There's no doubt there's some traumas are worse than others, by the way. But he was had tears in his eyes and was talking about how he felt in response to XXX. And it was very healing for the client, who felt accounted for in a way they never felt before.
Yes, yeah.
That's a world away from the phrase you use, which I really like, where you allow your own emotions to run away from you. You know, I think this is always what we're talking about here is so sensitive balance to be able to bring it back to the client and think about this clinically.
Yes, yes, yeah. Yeah. Is it in the service of the client? Yes.
Yeah. If it isn't, don't do it.
Yeah.
Your own therapist and say, well, I've started to be triggered by this. And I think it hinders the therapy and it takes away from where the client really needs to go to. And if I was a supervisor, I'd refer them to therapy.
Yeah. It's I mean, that's sadness. And I was thinking about like irritation and how that's not helpful to show that to clients.
Well, you keep having these statements. In general, they're right, but I think there's exceptions.
Yes, yes.
So, for example, let me say another one. A client, you're working with a client on identity issues, finding out who she is because she was so highly defined in her life by very strict, very strict parents. So she was highly defined and had no sense of her own self-agency. So how she coped with life was to be very adapted. Because survival for her was not to show herself. She had to be the way that her parents wanted her to be. Because if she dared to show her irritation, see where I'm leading with this? Or if she dared to show her authentic emotions in a history, she would get hit. And I do remember with somebody who I got irritated with. And I said, I just wonder if this is my irritation, but I get irritated, And the client said, it's so wonderful to hear you say that you're allowing yourself to express irritation because I was never allowed to do that. So why I'm saying that this is, in general, I agree with you. There's always cases, I think, in a relational type of work where with clinical thought, it might be the right way to go.
Yes, and I'm wondering if I've become a bit nickety-pickety about the difference between expressing, between feeling and expressing, or it's a bit like, because I do say, I'm feeling a bit irritated with that person or whatever. But I suppose I'm not displaying my irritation. I'm saying I feel it.
Oh, okay, there's a difference.
Yeah, yeah. As opposed to, tears in my eyes with a concentration camp work.
Yeah. So, and in transaction analysis, and people listening to this who weren't trained in TA, they might know the model parent, adult, child. And sometimes I can feel irritated at their parents.
Yes, well, me too.
Negative interjects. I think that's okay to say in the light of where you're going clinically.
Yes. I agree actually, but I always try and hold in that it's not my job to criticize their parents.
I'm not about criticizing.
Yes.
When I hear this, I feel this, and maybe and some of the feelings I get triggered when I hear about your father's or your mother's behaviour to you. Besides XXX, it's irritation with them. How come they didn't XXXX?
Yes, I do that. Yeah.
So in TA, if we're talking about thinking about a younger self, and certainly their parent ego state, which perhaps is so defining of them or impeding of their self growth, I sometimes can feel irritated. I may decide to say it in the service of the client and where we're going.
Yeah.
I mean, the trick is to think about it clinically.
Yeah. There always has to be a clinical purpose for it, not just throwing it in willy-nilly.
No. And I like your phrase, you said earlier, if you're going to express emotions, and they run away with you to the extent you can't be yourself, effective psychotherapy won't go anywhere.
Well, you've lost your potency, haven't you? So
lost potency, you've lost your adult and TA terms, and more than that, you've lost your clinical thinking. So we call potency, if you like.
Yeah, because it could be really hard to pull yourself back into your adult.
But I think it's an important discussion, because if we never allow ourselves to be vulnerable, and to the extent we're talking about here, the client might never ever get the permissions, if you like, from the important, significant other to be vulnerable in a healthy way.
Yes. And so you can be vulnerable and keep yourself safe.
In a healthy process.
Yeah.
And you're right. The more I think about it, the more we talk, it's the models which might train therapists. I think of certain models which are much more about being out of the relationship. Very much like the podcast we talked about earlier on, which was about models, being in the way of effective cure. So I can think of models would explicitly in the training talk about the therapist holding themselves back.
Yeah, because I suppose the one of the central tenets of training is that we're supposed to be impartial and come from the client's frame of reference. So that I could see how therapists would continue with that and not choose to bring themselves into the relationship with me.
Certainly we're trained. See, again, impartiality comes from the psychoanalytical tradition, keeping impartial and out of the relationship. And certainly I think it's important to have an understanding or a sense of attunement to a person's frame of reference. So we're in agreement with that. And maybe this is another podcast now about impartiality. Can we ever be impartial as a therapist? It's truly, it's like, and in fact, to be honest, I'd hate to be a therapist that was totally always impartial, because when I hear of such terrible actions and cruelty and defining of the other, and I could go through many clinical cases, I struggle to be impartial.
Yeah. Me too.
And maybe they need to hear, that behaviour was cruel.
Yeah.
And was atrocious. Whatever the context of XXX is, what we're talking about here is unacceptable.
Yeah.
And in the service of what I might call reparenting, in that reparative terminology, I think it's fine to say those things.
Yeah, me too. And when I do, the client is relieved.
Always. So I hear what you say, and I understand what you say, and I understand many schools would train therapists. And I think it's important to think that way, by the way, because we need to keep clinical neutrality. I think that's an important cornerstone. And I think there's times to step in a reparenting, reparative manner.
Well, I guess that kind of brings us back to the beginning of the podcast about the relationship. So if we're just one-dimensional, like a cardboard cutout, then that's not bringing ourselves into the relationship, and that isn't going to build a relationship. So
no, so I talk about expressing emotion, being vulnerable, being ourselves, having a sense of humanity, having a sense of an open heart and expressing love. I think they're wonderful things. And if they are in the service of where the client's going, that will make for effective psychotherapy.
I agree.
Oh, I'm going to end it. I'm going to say something here. I know we're coming to the end. Such a wonderful word you say. I think it should be the wonderful Kellie Barratt.
Oh, thank you, Bob.
No, we're in agreement that it's important to have, important to think clinically, and also it's okay to bring in some of the vulnerable parts of ourselves, because I think it models the client and many other things.
Yes, and it's being human. It's
one of the most wonderful qualities for a therapist to have and to show and to express is compassion.
Yes.
Without that, we become we certainly do become cardboard. What do you say?
Cardboard cutouts. Yeah.
The compassion is essential to the world of psychotherapy and effective cure.
It's a great word, and it's around because there's a compassion focused therapy that somebody mentioned, and I'd never heard of it recently. And it's not something, I suppose it's something we probably all have as therapists, but maybe we don't. Maybe I don't think about it in those.
And maybe we don't allow ourselves
to
think about how we can use our compassion in the service of the client, because our clients have had a world where compassion has never been on the table, and even more important, they haven't developed a compassionate friend for themselves.
Yes. It's very common, that, isn't it? So that lots of in TA terms, lots of controlling parent and not much nurturing parent. But
well, I would say our clinical lifetime of 38 years, I would probably say that one of the biggest duties, I hate the word duty, but tasks of psychotherapist is to look at the narrative, which can be so impeding on the freedom of the self, such as a negative hatred towards themselves, or a negative narrative towards themselves, which destroys all self-esteem. And if you can help the client develop compassion and to take on that hatred, what a wonderful template you're giving for the journey of psychotherapy ahead.
Yes. One client said to me, "Oh, you've taught me how to be kinder to myself."
Oh, that's wonderful. That is wonderful. To hear that is such a gift.
Yes. Because
Yalom, he wrote a book, didn't he, called Gift of Therapy or something like that, where he talks all about the gift of therapy and things that have moved him. But I really do advocate compassion and being able to allow yourself to express that in the service of the client.
Yes.
Tears or not.
Tears but not, did you say?
No, tears or not.
Yes.
Because that runaway bit you talked about. But, I do think that they need to. It's so important for a client who's had a world of being defined, put down, often cruel aspects, to see the heart of the therapist.
Yes. Oh, that's a lovely place to stop, Bob.
Good place to stop.
Yes. I've really enjoyed this podcast. Yes. And I look forward to our next one, which will be...
Yes, we're talking off air. What's the one going to be? And I think, Kellie's going to know.
Yes, with all my lists. I've got lists and red pens.
Kellie will know what 2011 is or whatever. It's 211, I mean. Well, Kellie's going to know.
I do. I've got my list. And the next one is, what is cure in the therapy process?
Well, we're talking about it now.
Yes, we are. So, yeah.
So you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say a lot more because
Yes.
I'm going to talk about what isn't cure.
Ooh. Oh, yes. Yes. Lovely. Good to see you, Bob. Great chat. See you next time.
I do think we've had more than a chat. I think we've had a discussion.
Oh, we have. You're right, actually.
Actually, yes. I hope
yes.
The listeners can take away from some nuggets in terms of allowing ourselves to express our own humanity and compassion and always in the sense of the clinical world.
Yes, I did not mean to discount our podcast, Bob.
I only said that because, why did I say that? I just think we say such important things, and I hope we're not too narcissistic here, but I do think that the way people have been trained, some people, as you started so correctly on this podcast, have often been trained to not bring our wonderful capacities in the service of healing.
Yes. And that's the stuff that makes the difference.
You're right. Okay, see you next time.
See you next time, Bob. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
You've been listening to The Therapy Show, Behind Closed Doors podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. We'll be back next week with another episode.